perhaps the greatest panel you will ever hear from at 3:45 today. Let me start by having each of you give a very brief, I'm going to pass this down, a very brief intro of yourselves, and then we'll get right into the questions.
Well, thanks, Clayton. And let me start out by saying that I really appreciate what you're doing in the Harlem area and what you're bringing to this community. I mean, my involvement here is because of Clayton and Bruce and Silicon Harlem, and we're able to make some amazing things happen that I'm so excited about. I am from Arizona, believe it or not, but have a connection at Columbia University, and we're building test beds in the community to bring in the next generation technologies, and again, made possible by Silicon Harlem and the great community that you have here.
So hi, good afternoon. I too am very thankful to Clayton and to Silicon Harlem in their leadership really around these issues. My background is that I taught for many years at Fordham Law School here actually, and now teaching at Georgetown's Law and Public Policy. And a lot of what I work on, and it was touched upon by Cy Vance, is this new wave of leadership at below the federal and state level, in cities in particular, because states and the federal level and national levels, really all over the world, aren't getting the job done on questions of equality and questions of justice, on questions of tech justice, really. I work with a group called the Global Parliament of Mayors that's trying to lead on these issues, but more to this audience, I work with Dan here and Clay and other folks on trying to put together a community broadband network and a new wave of computing for the future for that 40% of households who don't have access right now. We could talk more about that, but it strikes me that the future of all of this stuff, whether it's technology or a host of other issues, is really decentralization. Less and less will be wrapped up in central government and huge corporations, and more will be put in our hands, including technology, and there are lots of good questions about what are the consequences of that. Some good, some not so good.
You're all going to walk out of here with a college degree, all right?
Thank you. Hi, Dan Reyes from LDI, and thank you, Clayton, for having me as part of the panel. And I'm excited to be sitting next to Sheila and Dan, the brief moment that I had to catch up on what they're doing. It's amazing work, and being a product of NYCHA myself, I'm very happy to see that there's this effort being put forth to enhance and provide for some of the shortcomings that groups like that experience. At LDI, what I do specifically is I work with small to medium-sized businesses, and I help those businesses wrap their brains around all of the things that Cy mentioned and that have been mentioned here today around cybersecurity. So what we're providing is a sort of a one-stop shop for all IT needs for small to medium-sized businesses, and making sure that you can be productive, you can be safe, and you can get your jobs done without having to worry about the big baddies in the world. Kind of just focus on your core competency, leave the technology to us, leave the worries to us. We'll make sure you're well taken care of. And that's essentially what we're providing to groups like this and throughout the city across all different verticals.
Excellent. Our objective today is for you to walk out of here with something that you will either activate in your own business or your own life, or something you can share with others. But you want an outcome here, right? So this is not just a discussion for discussion's sake. We want you guys to all come out, I want to come out of this with an outcome. And we've got brilliant people. All of these people are brilliant. Dr. Foster, we talked about books all day today. Everyone had a book. Dr. Foster has like 20 of them. And Dr. Kilper is well documented as well. So let's go in, don't hold anything back. So I get to start. Dr. Kilper, why don't you talk about, I call it community as a platform. Harlem now is being positioned as a community as a platform, meaning that we will be in the position, this Upper Manhattan area, will be in the position to literally define what advanced technology will do for each and every one of us. we've been able to combine 5 different projects, if you will, that are going to literally transform how connectivity works, how the Internet of Things work, how cybersecurity is dealt with, all of that over the next 5 years. And that's no small thing, and Silicon Harlem is definitely involved in all of it, the Chamber's involved in all of it, and Dr. Kilper is also involved in all of it. So start with the term you guys been hearing in the news a little bit is 5G. Let's start with just talk about 5G. What the hell is it?
That's right. So I'm a scientist and engineer, and 5G wireless, of course, is if you open up your cell phone, we have that little 4G symbol there, right? So in 2020, we expect that the 5G standard would officially be rolled out, and you'll have a cell phone that'll have a little 5G symbol there. And just like 4G changed the way the game is played, because suddenly we have these smartphones and we're using our cell phones, our wireless for everything. That's what 4G gave us. Now 5G is the next thing. And actually, so what's the next thing? Well, the way that I look at it is that the internet, this whole wireless capability that we have, is going to become much more local, much more in the physical environment. And in fact, you see around the world, cities right now are racing and fighting to deploy what they call smart city test beds, to build out infrastructure for this 5G change. And they want it in their cities because if you have the advantage, if you have these capabilities, people will be able to do more and create more and be more artistically expressive through these technologies within your communities, and that's going to attract investment and economic development. So if you fall behind and you don't have these capabilities, that's going to set you back. And when I say that things are becoming more local, the 5G is going to give us more of what we call bandwidth, more speed with our internet, and importantly, what's called lower latency. So the amount of time it takes for signals to go around and for computing to happen. And there's a control loop that's going to be happening that allows you to manipulate things in the physical environment. And a great example is, let's say, emergency response. Today, in principle, we know that remotely we can do amazing things. So remotely, in principle, a doctor could perform surgery or some sort of operation on some patient that's far away, and it's done in certain ways. Well, in the future, with 5G, there's going to be so much bandwidth and it's such low latency that a doctor can be sitting in the emergency room and they can, and then a first responder can bring out some special tool that will allow the doctor then to manipulate and actually work on the patient right there where the accident is happening in ways that you just can't do today. And because of that, again, it's wireless, so accidents happen anywhere in a community. So you don't, and today we could do it, but you have to have a special room, a special setup, and everything. So that special room and special setup becomes in the community. You know, controlling a drone to go into a burning building so that the first responders don't have to be endangered there. So many things like that that involve actually manipulating things in the, you'll hear the term tactile internet. So you need a very fast response in your network in order for a doctor to make a movement and feel the response of that movement if they're trying to work on a patient, let's say, so that they can do an accurate adjustment or treatment. So that's the type of stuff that's going to happen. And what's going to make that work is this whole cloud, the cloud that came with 4G, they're going to have to bring it local. We call it the edge cloud, or sometimes you'll hear the term fog computing. So that cloud is going to have to become local so that you can support all these different types of services and so forth. And I would say that this is a great opportunity that communities need to get involved. There's going to be a change in infrastructure, a change in the internet, and again, it's coming local. It's going to affect your lives, how your traffic signals are working, how autonomous vehicles are running in your car, in your streets. And the communities need to have a say in that, and so that their needs and the way that they want their traffic signals to be run and the way that they want their communities to be protected from cybersecurity, from other threats or medical emergencies, that they're plugged in the right way. I love the discussion that we just heard a few minutes ago about we need better notices in our community about cybersecurity. Right? So again, this more local internet, there's an opportunity here for communities to get involved and to help shape that local internet, that edge cloud that's going to be coming, and not let the big companies come in and just tell you this is the way it is. And so, so that's the way I see 5G coming and the opportunity, I think, for communities like Harlem around 5G.
Is it going to be like Marbell again, or is it going to be competition?
Well, I mean, I should let Dr. Foster say. Let me just say, having worked at Bell Labs for a number of years, that's a great question, and we don't know the answer to that. And you know, one of the fantastic things about the internet, I'm a big technology guy. I want to see it used for good and to see good things happen. And the internet is an equalizer. It lets people express themselves around the world like they couldn't do before. But what we're seeing is if there's an inequality in terms of access, in terms of capability, then you don't get that. Certain voices get minimalized, right? And so, again, we can make it that equalizer. We can make it distributed and create opportunities for everyone if we set it up the right way.
All right. Again, outcomes, right? So one of the words that he and I haven't exchanged in the past, which I really like now, we've said it a whole lot of different ways, which is tactile internet. Anybody catch that? So tactile internet, that's one outcome right now that you have to go with, which, as related to 5G, means speed and latency, right? So if you're in an autonomous car, it means nobody's driving it. You do not want that signal to come late. So 5G is not only about speed and latency, but it's also, as he said, local, meaning that we're going to be putting up what's called small cells everywhere. Density matters, right? So the autonomous cars, the autonomous buses, everything that's going to be connected to the internet has to have a very low latency, so therefore it has to be local. That's why we talk about a local cloud versus going out to Google or Amazon or something like that and you don't know where the server is. So that also brings up this issue of what's the governance around all this stuff, or build on whatever you want to build on,
Yeah.
Sheila, as it relates to Dan.
So this last question was really important, right? Will it be like Ma Bell? So here's the analogy I would draw. Will it be like airline companies in which there's competition, or Uber in which there's competition? Airline companies, tickets have never been cheaper. Everyone can get a seat. But the fact is that for everything above a seat in which you're squished in, you have to pay for, right? So basically, you're in the back of the bus, squished in and miserable without any amenities, or to push the analogy, without the high speed, without the highest computer, unless you pay for it. Or will it be like Uber, right, in which all you need is the right app and you'll get picked up anywhere, right? I think that's an open question, is who's going to be able to afford all of the benefits of progress? What we know, and to me, I'm not a techie, that's not my training, but what we know about technology is what we know about everything that progresses, whether it's, schools, housing, any other amenity in life, that, in order for our markets to work, folks have to be left behind, right? Someone's got to subsidize everyone getting it, and either you pay a higher price or there's something else, there's some other cost. So my concern with this is that, on the one hand, this is great. It's all coming local, right? It's all landing in our communities, and that's one of the things that we're working on together, is to put this in our community, put things in your hand. We heard from a bunch of school teachers from all over the city yesterday at Silicon Harlem's new facilities. You should plug that. And it's striking the disparity in the schools, public schools even. Some classes do not have computers. The kids don't have them at home. They can't even send. All they have are their smartphones. So the question is, hey, can we somehow get homework on their smartphones? That's what the teachers are asking. Mm-hmm. Whereas some are doing robotics in class and they have Macs. So yes, this is all getting local. We have more access than ever in one sense, more progress, faster, everything. But it's not at all clear to me that local will mean truly accessible and affordable. And that really is the drive. And so the governance question, all governance means is who makes these decisions. The question is it going to be centralized in a Ma Bell, right, with or without competition, or will it be, or can communities make these kind of decisions and make sure that people have access? And just to close on the Cy Vance point, if they're so decentralized like that, do we make people more vulnerable to cyber attacks? And I really don't. And so to me, it's like, on the one hand, this is really good. We're going down to communities. It's something I want, and I've worked on my whole career to better meet people's needs at the community level. We're putting power there. We're putting resources. On the other hand, if we're not equipped to deal with this stuff, and technology is above my, I don't even know what the Internet of Things means, right? So if we're not equipped, do we make ourselves more vulnerable even as we're empowering ourselves? And so that's a bit of a paradox for me.
And part of the point here is we are in what I call the fourth industrial revolution, where these kind of revolutions only come around every 100 years or so. And this is a moment where the whole world has to upgrade, right? Whether it's connecting everyone or connecting everything, the entire world is going through an upgrade. And the difference that we can make in today's upgrade is profound. Because industrial revolutions in the past have primarily been designed, contemplated, and built by men. Designed, contemplated, and built by men with really nice degrees. Designed and built by men with nice degrees that grow up and live in the suburbs. So it's not that they're trying to be negative to anybody, but that's their prism. And we are finding out that when you have that type of prism, it can create divide. So we have a moment here as a community to add our voice. What about someone with different abilities? What about a senior citizen? What about a child? What about a rich person? What about a poor person? What about somebody that grows up in a concrete jungle like New York City? We have to now add all voices if we want our next infrastructure to be for equity. And that's the moment that we have right now. But there's also a right now in terms of what's happening in our offices. You have something to say about us, our business owners here, and what should we be thinking as we think about our office of the future?
I think it's a great question, and it's one that when you think about 2040, you think about we're 20 years removed from the year 2000, and we expected flying cars, and we expected all kinds of, wild stuff, which hasn't happened, but a bunch of other amazing things have. And what we're seeing is that, a lot more offices are getting away from cubicles. They're going to open spaces. They're trying to, do away with the walls, literally, of what divide people and trying to, join people together in a more community-based sort of a setup. And you want people, especially your younger generations, they want, the millennial types want to be able to work from anywhere, work from environments that feel more like home and less like a strict office environment. And so a lot of what's going to come down the pipe, I think, is going to be things that facilitate that. But then you're going to have the things that eventually will get to the point where you have the types of interfaces that you've only seen in movies. The Minority Report and the thing where Tom Cruise is in, wearing a virtual reality sort of a setup. We see that that's already here. And you have, you talk about manipulating things in real time over the internet. Those kinds of things we're on the cusp of that. And by 2040, it'll be, rote. It'll be, the routine where you'll call a car that's driving itself. You're able to work from the back seat of that car because you have who knows what G internet at that point. You're getting work done on the way to work. Every car on the road is automated, so you're never late anymore because every car is talking to every other car and is talking to other systems that are managing them. So you know that when you leave your house at 8:30, you're going to get to the office by 9. You're going to be able to walk in. You're going to walk into an office space that potentially is going to know who you are by recognition. It's going to dim the lights the way you like them. It's going to turn on the music you like and you're going to be able to concentrate to. All these types of things. Your desk is going to adjust to the right height because you feel like standing that day, and the temperature is going to be set to the way you want it. You talk about Internet of Things is going to enable all of those different things to be a reality. And it's really going to be a game changer in terms of productivity and in terms of making the office, something that's really personalized.
Well, it's interesting. It's not only office, and the way you just described it, it's also your home. Imagine walking up to your door, it knows you and just unlocks, lets you in. I'm ready to live like that right now, actually. But there's so much coming. There's so much coming. And the good news is what we're doing here between Silicon Harlem and these great minds and the chamber is we're trying to do all this stuff the right way, meaning we're putting real research behind this. This isn't just rolling something out and hope it works. So one of my pet peeves is that the city has done many great trials and yet errors. You can walk around Harlem and look up at buildings and just see old wire still hanging around and antennae that's not being used, routers and access points. At one point, they were supposed to be the solution. And what happens, as I've said, the community's voice hasn't always been considered. If I went to a mayor's town hall 20 years ago and another mayor's town hall a few years ago, 20-year difference, same issues were coming up. Exact same issues. How do we let that happen? Partly because we think the government can solve everything for us. What we're finding in the last 20 years is that technology has helped a lot of us in the private sector particularly to figure out ways. I always tell people, Uptown's had Uber a long time. We had Uber way before Uber. Taxis used to not come up here. But we knew how to pick up the phone, call a number, and that dude was right in front of you in a minute and take you anywhere you go. We just didn't have the app. So none of this is all that greatly new. The whole purpose for all the technology right now is not technology for technology's sake. Tech is to do one particular thing, which is what we've always wanted to do since the history of the country. How do you make lives better? And so I'm going to be stumping my own message throughout this conversation because it's so important that we all, I think Lloyd said it earlier, it's getting access to the information. It's not necessarily, whether you're tech savvy or not. It's most important that we get the information to the community, right? When I tell you the 4 issues I hear at these town halls from 20 years ago and yesterday, garbage, we got problems with garbage. Noise, too much damn noise. Let me give the crime is sort of fallen, but crime's still a thing. And then the last one, what do we all think? Rats! Yeah. We've been hearing that all, I've been hearing that all. So the question is, are we creating an infrastructure that can solve those problems? This isn't always just solving the problem of tech for tech's sake. Say, oh, this thermostat's smarter now. No, are we approaching the community issues? And it's now going to require public and private to come together to figure this out.
So Clayton, I want to ask you a question.
Please.
For IR, you mentioned the 4th Industrial Revolution. And also, Dan here mentioned all the things that technology is going to be able to do that we used to do ourselves. Both of those things mean loss of jobs and loss of opportunity, even at low wage levels for people who don't have these fancy degrees. What part of this transformation can communities work on that will prepare people to be able to participate in it, to make a living?
And Bruce, if you want to sort of chime in on this, feel free. We're talking about the loss of jobs as a result of the extraordinary technology that we have at our hands and how everything is going to be tech-enabled. So my first reaction is there are jobs coming in this country that we can't even imagine yet. All right, when we're looking at food shortages, when we're looking at space travel, when we're looking at animal replacement, robotics, there's a whole lot of jobs that are coming, and the jobs that will be lost will be, as you're saying, much more robotic, much more things that are just routine, but there's still going to be hands-on activity throughout the rest of time, I believe. But there will be new jobs. So the critical thing for a community is to help shape the minds of our young people and all of us to what I believe is what's called, what we used to call back in the day, was critical thinking. We call it now computational thinking. And the reason why we call it computational thinking is because computers figure out problems in a very organized way. We can train our minds to do that. And so when you have a big problem like, hey, let's all go to Mars. Well, that sounds cool, but you got to now figure out how to do it. So when you have a problem, you got to now, what we call decompose it, break it into different little problems. So you solve the little problems to solve the big problem. You do what we call pattern matching. This is what computers do. They look at patterns and they go, oh, that's all the same. We can put that over here. And let's deal with the third thing, which are abstractions. Once you do that, you'll end up with what we call an algorithm. That algorithm means that I can give it to you. If I gave you all the ingredients to make a brownie, but you didn't know you were making a brownie, if my algorithm works, it will come out as a brownie. So that's what we're trying to do with those who could be left behind, is to now train the mind so that no matter what we go into and no matter what jobs are lost, they'll be in the position to be a contribution. Dan.
Yeah, and if you have technology, if you have access to technology and you know how to use it, you'll have a job. Right? That's the key,
simpler
right?
than what I said. Very good.
Or let's put it the other way. If you don't have access to technology and you don't know how to use it, then you're going to be the guy who loses his job, right? Because some
That's
fancy
even
algorithm
today.
came along
Yeah.
and is doing the job for you. Something is being remotely managed. But if you've got those technologies in your community and you're learning how to use them and work with them, and we talked about virtual reality and things like that. It sounds like, well, what do I use that for? Well, job training, right? So physical manipulation. So you can actually be in a virtual environment and work with things and remotely control things, or be trained on something that then allows you to do something in the physical world, right? So there's lots of ways that technology will be used, and if we can get it into the community, and I love the example of if we had technology in Harlem back in the day when you couldn't get a taxi here, so and people were innovating around that kind of space and creating apps and stuff, maybe we would have had Uber a lot earlier, right? I mean, there's
From within the community.
yeah, and when you're in a community where people are struggling and trying to find solutions so creatively, that's an idea engine that we're missing out on if we don't have that technology there. And I think that's what we'd like to see turned around.
Well, that's the great thing about Harlem, is that we've got a tradition of entrepreneurialism. We've seen very successful people come out of Harlem. And what we have to do now is connect the dots with technology and make sure that our businesses here have the same tools that any other business has and be able to thrive in this emerging economy. We're doing that. We're really doing that. I know the Chamber has been very dedicated to digital literacy, for example. We want all our businesses to be up to speed and having good connectivity and being able to manipulate and grow through these tools. It absolutely is necessary. I am open to some questions. Let me grab one of the mics. It's cool. And you guys can share. Okay, we're going to start with Solomon.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Solomon Green, IT consultant, SG Technology Group. Two points that were made was the 5G coming into effect, and also the Internet of Things and how things will be able to be automated and things of that nature. First of all, I believe that adds another level of security that would have to take place, because now you're talking about the fact that all of your information as far as how you like your temperature and things of that nature and your heights and things of that nature is now also information out there. So there has to be a way to protect that. What is the solution for that? And also, with these new technology, usually the new technologies come with a price tag on that. And how does that affect the access point that we're talking about?
I
There's a
could
couple
feel-
questions there. You go ahead.
Yeah, I'll field a bit around the security around IoT, because with any convenience comes an inherent loss of security. There's always a trade-off between those two things. And so the key thing to securing your IoT environment or any kind of new technology that you want to introduce into your business is visibility. You have to know what things are doing, how information is flowing, and you need to be able to manage that in a way so that it's kept secure, and it's kept visible only to those people that should have access to those types of information. We do assessments for our clients and even for some of the people that we are doing consulting for all the time, where we find that there's personally identifiable information sitting wide open in files on the network that anybody could get access to. And it's the fact that people get complacent and get, a lot of times they just don't know what they don't know. And I think that the key thing is, along with being automating the visibility into what your devices are doing, is also the key thing of any security approach is going to be education. And people, unfortunately, are always going to be the weakest link in any security chain. And so another part of what we bring and try to enforce is education, constant reminders of what people should and shouldn't be doing. They spoke about these attacks, these inbound attacks of someone impersonating a high-level executive in a company, and it's about knowing to keep your eyes open for things and just taking an extra second before you click or before you respond to something, and just think, does this look right? Does it feel right? And then take the right action, based on that. So another thing I would say is that the affordability aspect, one of the great things about technology is that it tends to, as it evolves, get less expensive and more accessible. And so I would expect that there's a lot already in your environment that you don't know. If someone brings Amazon Alexa into work, all of a sudden you've got an IoT device in your environment and you don't realize that now that potentially, and we've seen it, it's listening to you all the time. And you put that thing in your boardroom, and now you've got a device that's listening to you in the most intimate settings in your office. And what are the implications of that? And so people, you've just got to be extra, extra careful with what's allowed in your environment and being able to be visible to, have visibility to everything that's going on so that you can then put the right controls around them.
So, one of the questions we're thinking about in this project is whether data, all the stuff that these new devices will collect, can somehow be owned in communities or managed by the community instead of centralized in a so a lot of the hacking that goes on is because all the data is in one corporation. And all you got to do is get into that one corporation and get access to millions of pieces of information. So what happens in a decentralized system in which, if things are now community-based, some of the data is kept at a local level? That raises a whole nother set of questions, but it's worth thinking about. It's one of the things that we're trying to innovate around is, because it's not just security, it's privacy, right? And so I don't know the answer, but it's the kind of thing that,
Yeah,
Go
these
ahead,
are
Dan.
some great points. And is this on? Yeah. So in New York City, a high-density urban environment, right, is sort of the ideal environment to set up computing, IoT, networking. It's when you look at where's the expense. If I want to roll out IoT and these technologies across Central Virginia or something, that's a nightmare because everyone is spread out so far. Here, there's such a high density that it makes the ideal case for making it affordable. That's the environment that should be leading to affordable access. And so one example is, one of the things that we're looking at is New York City, and let's give credit to the mayor's office. So they said that broadband access is a utility. It's a right. Everyone should have broadband access. And they've been rolling out fiber all over the city. So there's tremendous bandwidth in the streets. And we said, well, let's take that bandwidth and take these new edge cloud capabilities that are moving into these communities because of 5G and the speeds and low latency of 5G that'll be there, and take advantage of that to have a more affordable and secure computing environment. There's a technology called zero clients, where basically you take the processor out of your interfaces to bring down the cost, make it more affordable, and at the same time you make it much more secure. and you run your machines off of a high-speed edge cloud where you get high-performance computing from a data center environment where they can manage the security, they can manage the updates and patches and everything else. So that's a new way of thinking about computing in terms of especially home use that can really change things around. And you can do that in a place like New York and a place like Harlem where you have the density of people to make it that it can work. So we're investigating with that to see if it can give you a solid experience in terms of computing. And in fact, we have, I'll say, there's a couple of these Zero clients right at the top of the stairs there, and we're doing trials because we want people to try it out and see if that technology works for you and what are the requirements to make it so that it's a good, positive experience.
You know, one of the things that we're doing with that, and Solomon, I think Dwayne has a question after me, but we're able to look at it as, what if the community could upload its own software? Civic-driven software, things that are just impacting the neighborhood. This is sort of what's old is new again. If you're old enough to remember where there were mainframes in corporations, and you would have just a terminal to access everything. It's similar to that. And the good news from a cybersecurity perspective, to your point, Solomon, is that when you centralize the server, if you will, there's only one point you got to go check out. When you have everyone with a computer and processing and on screens and everything else, that attack can come from anywhere, and it's a nightmare to try to solve. So there's a lot of interesting things. All of this is under research right now. We're not deploying. It's under research. We want everyone to weigh in. This won't work for me, or this is how this should work for me. All of that's going to happen. So we're doing this over the next 5 years, is just figuring this out. Dwayne, you had a question? Yeah, wait for the mic.
Thank you, sir. Hi, good afternoon. Thank you guys for all the information you've been sharing. Thank you, Lloyd. My name is Dwayne Norris, financial services professional. My first question is probably a basic one, and maybe it'll help everybody here, but I was learning about, locking your computer, covering your camera. I currently don't do enough of that, and I don't really do anything specifically to protect the device in my pocket. What should we be doing to protect our cell phones, which I make a lot of transactions on, I buy stuff on? Is there anything specifically I should be doing with that device? And then my other question is a little bit more forward-thinking, which has to do with blockchain technology and all the investments being made into that. Do you see that playing a role in the way business is done and business transactions, as well as cybersecurity and how it tracks and monitors transactions?
Good.
Maybe let me try and address the last question, because I'm learning a little bit about that, and I have something to say there. That more and more we're seeing blockchain and blockchain-type solutions as a nice means of securing a lot of things that are happening in the background in networks and IoT and these technologies. There are numerous startups that are investigating the use of that technology so that they can keep things secure in any type of financial transaction that's going on. There again, it's a question of if there's infrastructure in the community, infrastructure that's supporting these types of services that blockchain can run over, that can keep your data secure in a edge cloud environment, let's say, what we've been talking about here, and keep all the transactions secure that are happening financially. So that's a great new development and technology that can help with the security problem for sure.
I think specifically around the protection of the device in your pocket. Simplest thing is a password, a complex one, 6 digits. Make it so that if you leave it and someone finds it, they can't unlock it. And potentially, if you want to go to the extreme, set the kind of setting where after 10 attempts, the device is wiped and all the data is gone. That's one simple way to do it. You can get more extreme with it, and some of the solutions that we do for some of our clients is that we have software that's installed and that really locks down the settings on the phone, prevents people from going to places where they shouldn't, doing things that they shouldn't, exposing data that they shouldn't. So there are a lot of different solutions, but the simplest one for just the general public is probably just putting that code on it and just making sure that you have good backups of your information. If it gets lost, you don't feel that bad that if you can't recover it and it has been wiped, then at least you can go back to an old backup. That kind of also is a good a good practice for business and in general for the data that you have in your company. You talk about computers being locked and having rules that make that happen. All of that should be automated. A lot of what we do for our clients, and forgive me if this sounds like a pitch, but what we're able to do is bring enterprise level type security and controls down to the small business level so that you have the ability to feel secure in that you are as protected as the big guy. You have backup, you have multi-point security that's keeping the bad guys out and keeping even the people inside protected and safe from doing things that they shouldn't do. Stuff like this, like I said, technology advances, those things get more and more affordable. You're able to do this as a small business, and you're able to, be more productive and also still be secure in your day-to-day operations.
Just a quick point on that. So with my phone, right, if somebody finds my phone, they can't break in because I either have a pattern or a password protection. But what about the ability for them to hack the phone from another device outside of that? Is there something I should be doing to protect from that type of ability for them to watch my transactions and see me making PayPal deposits or, just stuff like that? I don't know if there's anything that you guys can share, but something that was going through my mind today.
I think a lot of the same things apply there. I have an Apple iPhone, and I feel that it's a more secure platform in general, personally, than an Android. I feel like the Android market and generally with the Android store, you're a little bit more exposed to potentially kind of malicious or sketchy applications. And really the key that you want is to just stay within apps and especially websites that are backed by a well-known, reputable company. You may see, and a lot of times, every other day, there's a story about an Android app or even sometimes an Apple app that it promises better battery life or promises better performance because it does all these background enhancements. And meanwhile, what they're doing is they're installing backdoor agents that do all kinds of things. Some things could be a little innocuous, like they're doing Bitcoin mining or doing all those other things like that. Other times, they may potentially be stealing information, from your device and or doing, monitoring. I haven't heard a lot of stories about someone being able to watch everything that you're doing, like in real time. But that's not to say that it's not possible. Make sure you stick to installing only apps that are certified, that come from one of the two major app stores. Don't load things from third-party websites or anything like that. That's going to go a long way toward keeping you secure.
I want to keep it moving and try to get. Who's got the time? I'm off. 25. Okay, so we're going to take a couple more questions. Jeffrey?
My name is Jeffrey Eaton. I'm the first vice president of the NAACP New York State Conference. And we primarily spend a lot of time doing voter registration and then driving people to the polls. We have the voter activation network called the VAN program, where we collect profiles of data so we can do patterns of where to find where voters want to do and their issues. We're trying to get municipalities to come into 2040 by doing same-day registration electronically and also voting electronically on the same day. And then Russiagate comes along and pushes us further back. Are y'all working on anything to deal with this issue right now? Because that's really primarily important to us and how we can do to protect, because we look at it as voter suppression. Thank you.
Are you doing anything on voting? I mean, I would say, so because the voting process, as you know, is so controlled at a state level and it's not like devices we can put right in a neighborhood. All the devices that we vote on are actually heavily controlled precisely because of Russiagate, right? Precisely because you want to limit who has access. So, but having said that, it's a very interesting question about whether this kind of technological progress can innovate in the voting arena, because what we are seeing is not just hacking, but also kind of making it more difficult, putting up more barriers for communities to vote. And so I just don't know. I don't have a good answer to that question. It's an excellent question.
Who do we got? Serene, go ahead.
Okay, so Clayton is not going to like what I'm going to say right now.
Don't say it.
But that's okay. So I'm old school, right? I don't do PayPal because I don't trust it. If you owe me money, you give me a check or you do Chase Quick Pay, right? So there's all this. You talked about the two, whatever the lack of word, of certified Play Store or whatever it is to download the app. I'm like, you know, Miss Foster, I'm not very tech savvy. I know some things, but not a lot of things. I know, Lloyd, hurry up. So the question is, no, but seriously, what are some specific things for those of us who are old school, right, that you can do to try and protect yourself against some of these attacks or things that you need to do? And these are things I mentioned earlier about that tip sheet that you can add, Lloyd and Clayton, when you create that with Cy Vance's office.
Who wants to take that on?
I can try. Education is the number one thing. Making sure that you're not clicking things that you shouldn't is going to be, part of that. As much as possible, and if you're running your own business and you have a network infrastructure and you have computers and servers and all these other things that you need from a technology perspective that run your business, the best things that you can do is try to automate a lot of, take the human element out as much as possible, automate as much as you can to try to keep people away from sites that are going to imitate Chase and imitate Citibank, because a lot of that stuff is well known enough that if you tried to, with the right tools in place, try to get to one of those sites, it would block you and say, this is a malicious site. You can't get here. So a lot of that is going to go a long way toward keeping you safe. And then again, I think that the tip sheet is an excellent idea. And one of the questions that comes to mind is, how do you get that into enough hands? Because to spread that knowledge and make it powerful, that's a great question. I think that's something like, I think back to like the old NBC commercials, the more you know, right? Having someone sit on a stool and say, don't click bad links or check twice, who sent you an email. I think something like that would be great, and I think would go a long way. Education is going to be the number one thing. I mean, eventually technology you're going to have to catch up, and even a Chase, Quick Pay or something like that has technology behind it. You just got to find that balance where you're comfortable enough to say, like a PayPal, I do that all the time. I'd rather do that than put my credit card into a website any day of the week, because I'd rather put my PayPal information in that doesn't directly show my credit card or give my credit card information to someone. I do that all day versus putting my credit card into a site that I even have a second thought about.
Let me just say,
Tip sheet is a good idea, though.
let me just say, I absolutely was not telling you to hurry up. I want you to know that. I just wanted to make sure we heard everything you had to say. No rush. And this has been fascinating for me, because between Clayton and my wife, they've been trying to, like a ping pong ball, try to get me into technology. And I've actually aggressively resisted it. No, aggressively resisted it. And part of that is I like to, at some point, turn my brain off, okay? Sheila Foster said something that has stuck with me for the last half hour or so. It related to the Uber conversation. And she got to the point that I was concerned with, and I didn't know I was until you just said it. And that was creating from within. I want to know how we can create from within. I want to know about those students who don't have computers, those classes that are not being taught, those seniors who are being victimized. And if we can be talking about creating from within, Bruce, I heard that from you a couple of years ago about creating from within. So I just want to say from a non-techie perspective, I'm glad I'm here. I'm glad I listened to what y'all had to say, and I now have a better vision. As it relates to the chamber, Emmett and Jeff and the rest of us, we have comfortably turned over our technology direction to Clayton. Sometimes you have to have faith in people. Marco is the one who tells us these things. Bruce and Clayton, they live it. They represent us. And we could not be in better hands. And then you spoke to me about the Sheila Foster. And I had an opportunity to pull a couple of things out of what you had to say. Great panel. And, you know, not to stop the conversation, but this has been a learning experience from me. And if we can figure out how to create from within, then I'm down. You know, but I don't want my brain to be used and my limited resources to be used to just make somebody else richer and somebody else smarter while I see our kids being treated the way they are. So you guys have given it direction. I much appreciate it. Much respect what you've had to say.
Excellent,
Let,
that's good.
let me follow up on that. So I think fantastic choice to put your hands, put the community in the hands of Bruce and Clayton. One example of the sort of programs that they're doing, there's something that they call the Reyes project. It's together with New America. So they're building out wireless mesh networks. And to me, one of the things that's really exciting about this project is they didn't bring in a bunch of people from the outside and start setting up network equipment. They actually created a program of digital stewards where they recruit from within the community and train these kids how to set up wireless mesh networks, wireless access points. And they do it in a very interesting way where, you know, not everyone is that interested in how a wireless router can be programmed, but they are interested in enabling access and working with the community on using the internet. So they divide these cohorts up into different teams where some folks are focusing on working with the community, how to deploy the equipment, where it's going to go, how it's going to get used. Others are focusing on programming those routers, and they look at the different talents and they help to work with those to create a team that then goes out and makes a difference in the community. And that's just one example of the types of programs that these guys are doing to really create that opportunity to create from within.
Yes, well, so we have a few more questions. We're going to take you in the back, and then over here, and then over here. To Dan's point, we recruited the kids from East Harlem, and most importantly, we trained them for 4 months. We don't train people anymore. We train them for 4 months. So these kids now are on a pathway to become network engineers. Most of them did not finish traditional high school. That didn't mean that they're dumb. They just, whatever, the system didn't work for them the way it was supposed to. And so these young people are now going up on rooftops and able to literally deploy a network. And one of the things, the outcomes that I really appreciate is when one of the young people come back to me and say, you know, Mr. Banks, I was walking down my street, and my neighbors were like, we're very proud of you. Because now that kid can walk down the streets of his own neighborhood with stuff in his hands and with an expertise that the entire neighborhood gets a benefit out of. So that's the great outcome of these type of things. Yes, young lady.
Good afternoon. My name is Denise. This is a personal question. I don't have no business. I'm a retiree, but I do have a computer. We're talking about security. What happens when you get a virus in your on your computers and you can't do anything, and then you call for help and they get all your data? How that you could prevent them to use your data and use it someplace else?
Sounds like a tricky situation if you've called someone and if they've gone in and taken your data, and you know, assuming it's not a reputable place, it's tough. It's almost as if you know, kind of open your wallet and yeah.
Do we have any IT folks here? All right. See the guy right there? Solomon, he's going to talk to you afterwards. You're right, it's personal, but we've all gone through it. So that's the good news. Thank you. So let's keep it going. We had a question over here, Solomon.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Daniela, BNMA, and I have a question relating to like the more you know, what the gentleman said. And my question is that I am wondering if there's a way that either the Greater Harlem Chamber of Commerce either partners with, key organizations in the Bronx or in Brooklyn, so that way this kind of information, I'm thinking specifically about the cheat sheet, that's something I know that a number of communities in Brooklyn, like businesses, would actually love to actually access. So I guess the thought process is, I guess, if we are creating a hub of knowledge in Harlem, we also have to be careful that we're not creating inequality within the other community of colors, if that makes sense. So I'm wondering if there's a way that we can sort of like pull in some of the other communities, right? Whether it's in the Bronx, in Staten Island, in Brooklyn. So this is a world-class event, and it's at Columbia, and we have access. What else can we do? I guess that's my question.
It's a good question. Solomon, grab it. Bring the mic up here for Lloyd.
Real simple answer. Harlem is a state of mind to us. It is not a location. It is not in Manhattan. It is not in mid-Manhattan. It is a state of mind. Clayton and Bruce, they've been around the world, much less Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, Staten Island. So the message that is being conveyed is for whoever needs to receive the message or who asks to get the message. So we have no borders, and whatever we can do to convey this, we're there, okay? Contact us. You just got an answer. I'm right here. Okay.
And I'm right here.
Okay.
I got you.
Okay.
All right. So we have, I promised him over here at the far end, then we'll come back to you. All right? Over here, yes. Oh, yes. That's hope.
How's everybody doing? It's a long night. My name is Dr. Odom. I'd like to say thank you for all the information that was spread. Very informative panel. I like it very much. Thank you. A few things. One of the things that I would say is that if we're talking about building within, like the president said, one of the things I would recommend is that we would do stuff with security to be able to protect the systems, because that's important, because no matter who has the internet, everybody could be hacked. There are all different types of things that can happen. So we should also possibly, because I'm from the concrete jungles where dreams are made of. So therefore, we should be able to do some things to be able to protect the system. So if we also training our people about this also, it's always going to be a market for that. It's always going to be a job for that, because you have to protect the systems. Another thing I would say is, with that cheat sheet that we're talking about, we should also, as I guess the lawyer on the panel can also attest to, that we should also put down some legal implications. What can happen when you're doing this internet, and what may be admissible in court to be used against you. Because that could be a big bed that can cause so many different issues from a legal standpoint of what you're doing while you're on the internet and what information they can watch and use against you. The other thing that I would like to say is that while we're doing all of these different things, to please just watch, because with this information, I'm also retired law enforcement, and I just want to tell you, anything that you ever text is there for life. For life. You could hit the delete button 1,000,000 times. Anything that you text or you send on these phones, we have it for life. So you think you hit the delete button, and I always say, be cautious of what you say certain times on their phone or you're texting or whatever, because if you say, I'm going to kill you, whatever, and you think that was a joke, when we come to court and we pull that out, we have you said, I'm going to kill you, and we have you read it right there. So therefore, just watch some of these things. It's exciting and it's new, and like the president, this will be my last remark, I didn't want anything to do with computers. I went to college when it was typewriters. So when I became a commissioner, they kept on trying to get me to use the computer, and I refused. And one day I came in, the mayor sent me to computer class so that I could learn how to use the computers, because I always wanted to use my typewriter. So it's great. We need to be in the 21st century, but we need to have these different types of things, like I said, to be able to protect any type of system. Anybody's going to need you to protect your system, and also the legal ramifications on what you put on that internet, what can be used and held against you in a court of law. Thank you.
All right. That was right on the money. I can only take one more question, and that's Hope.
Hello, my name is Hope. I'm a business owner. I'm a third-generation Harlemite, which if you're not from New York, you do not know how rare that is. I was struck by something you said, the training program. And I'm also a business owner, and I'm really insistent on keeping my business in Harlem. But because of gentrification, my Harlem is disappearing. And what I see is that with the training programs like yours, there's potential to keep people in communities, these communities who would normally need to flee. And I'm wondering, are you looking to diversify your training programs to assist other entrepreneurs so that they can keep people in Harlem, other community organizations, so as a way of addressing the gentrification?
A great question, and it's a good one to end on. We'll let all of the panelists say a few parting words, and I've got a top 5 list, Ben, that I'm going to share with these folks. At the end of the day, for us, Silicon Harlem, we're trying to approach 2 key things: injustice and lack of equity, which translate for us into access and exposure. So we're not 100% ID driven. We're much more driven. We know that you can stay in your community if you just have the access and the exposure and the experience to ensure that you can stay in your community. And we think that's important. And that should be the outcome of what we do overall. We've talked about helping Harlem become sort of that tech hub so we can attract great companies into Harlem. That's a great thing from an economic perspective. But in addition, we spend a lot of our time, last week we had 200 kids, and we literally helped them think through a bunch of different problems, which will set them up on a pathway to college and into workforce and stay in their neighborhood. So it's for another panel when we talk about gentrification, but I will say the positive outlook is if you give people, just a quick personal story, and then I'm going to turn it over. But this is my personal story. My team's heard it 100 times, so they're over there falling asleep. But I knew I was pretty smart when I was a kid, 2nd grade and stuff like that. But I also didn't. But all my friends were smart, so I was like, so what? But I always had the top grade when it came to papers and writing stuff. And I always wondered why, and years later I realized my father bought children's encyclopedia, and I loved them. I read them every night, whether I had an assignment or not. But when the teacher said, hey, we want everybody to do a paper on Mars, I was in there like that, and I figured out my friends didn't have that. There were slaves that were botanists and physicists and all these things. They just didn't have the access to the books. So this is not about intelligence. This is about access and exposure. So if we can do that at a grand scale, not only will people be protected in their own communities and know how to thrive and build, but we'll create the greatest Harlem of all time. We talk about the Renaissance, we talk about these great things. The one thing that I look forward to is how we have a sustainable economic engine that's benefiting everyone. That's it. Let me go ahead and turn it over to the panelists. I'm going to give you the top 5 that you guys are going to trip off of, but go ahead.
So training and building from within. So I want to get back to something that we talked about right at the beginning. So Clayton mentioned that there's these different technology projects that are happening in Harlem. I mentioned a test bed. So the National Science Foundation, federal government, this is an organization that's doing some amazing things. They get it. They see the potential of making a difference. And they're funding they're going to fund 4 smart city test beds. And the first one that they chose and that they funded was right here in Harlem. So we put in an application to build a smart city test bed, and we made the case that bring the technology in here, let the people in the community work with it, learn about it, be a part of that test bed, and not only can we get world-class technology and research out of it and business development, but we can help to transform a community from within and help them to grow as a community. And NSF, they understood that, and they said, this is going to be our first test bed. So they're funding us to build this test bed here in Harlem, and that's going to be happening over the next 3 years, basically. And so you're going to see people running around with these strange radio devices and antennas, doing experiments. And one of the key things about that is that's going to create many opportunities, and businesses who want to get involved in this 5G transformation, this new technology, they'll want to come into Harlem and have presence here and work with that test bed. And startup companies, folks within Harlem, within the universities here who want to create for this new generation of technology, they'll have a leg up over the competition because of the test bed capability that's here. And we want to make sure that we're training folks within the community. So if you know people who want to get involved in technology, so Cosmos is the name of it's kind of like the, if you remember the old, the New York soccer team, right, the Cosmos. Well, we're the Cosmos test bed, and we're building that out, and we're looking for folks in the community to get involved in that. We want your input, and we want folks to help us to build it together with you in the community.
So I want to say that even though I played a bit coy about technology in terms, I have a smartwatch, I have a tablet, I have 2 or 3 computers. I send my son to coding camp every summer. He just finished. You know why? Not because I think technology is the end-all and be-all or a panacea, but I do think all these things are connected that Hope brought up, right? You can't set aside gentrification and poverty and lack of housing stuff from technology in the future of work, in the future of economic progress. And I do think that Silicon Harlem has its finger on the pulse of this stuff in a community that will be empowered if we get it right, and will be able to really create its own destiny. Just like, you know, our world has changed because of Silicon Valley, it can happen here. And everything that Dan just talked about. So what I would say is that even if you don't know any of these terms, or you're not engaged at the highest level of technology, understand this. This is what the assembly line was to the Industrial Revolution. Mm-hmm. You know, when I was growing up, my mother said to all of us, like, you want to be a doctor, lawyer, or dentist. Those were the opportunities coming out of segregation. Mm-hmm. I don't ask my son that. I'm like, you want to go to college? That's good. But know how to code. Know how to create a business. Learn about balance sheets. That's the least, if we don't understand it, the people that we're taking care of, whether it's our kids or nieces or nephews or the kids on your block, I want to empower them, and that's why I'm on this team here.
Wonderful. I don't want to keep everybody from Clayton's top 5 any longer, so I'm excited. I want to know what it is. I want to know what it is too. I just want to say thank you. It's been great being part of this panel, and the questions and just being part of this. I'm looking forward to myself personally and LDI helping the cause further, and I'm sure there's going to be great things to come. And with that, again, just a big thank you. Appreciate it.
Excellent. Give them all a hand. I promised my top 5, so here's top 5 things. Some of them you may agree with, some of them you'll be queasy about, but think about 40, 50 years from now. That's where my mind sort of operates most of the time. So 1, you won't have a device in your pocket no more. There will be no device. Number 2, you probably will be spending more time in a virtual world than a physical world. Hello? Everybody hear me? Yeah, so for some of us, that's an amen. That's right. Number 3, tied to number 1 about having no device, you will have a level of wearables. stuff that's in your body, stuff that's on your clothes, things of that nature, that control everything. Number 4, you're going to have a robotic relationship. Just walking around with your little robot. Look up some stuff over in Asia. Lastly, we will be living a lot longer. We already are, but it's going to accelerate. And when you think about that, it will have to be a world of peace. We can't continue this ongoing focus on our differences. We have to come together around our commonalities, including this audience right here. We have to come around that to make sure that the future is bright and not Einstein said, we can't solve our problems with the same thinking that created them. So we have got to figure this out. With that, I'm going to say thank you, personally, thank you to my team, the Silicon Harlem team who's here. Thank you to my Greater Harlem Chamber partners in crime, Marco and Winston and Jeffrey, and of course, El Presidente. And most importantly, thank all of you for being here. Let's give the panel one more hand. Brilliant minds, brilliant minds. Thank you all very much. Have a great night.